Oh, it's so windy out here. I hope you can hear it. I'm just hanging out reading my news, but I'm listening to Reuben share. I wish I had. Let me block the wind. Can I borrow this helmet?
Yeah.
All right. What was I'm on? What was the story about?
I'd rather talk about.
No, the one on.
No, let me cover this one. The Bible says the Lord was crucified on the day of preparation. The day of preparation was when Israel took their Passover knives to their Passover lambs. 7 days before the day of preparation, Jesus comes into Jerusalem. Teachers of the law, Pharisees, are trying to find a flaw in him. This woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law says, shall we pay taxes to Caesar? But he always gave them a flawless, amazing answer.
I recently taught that one. The one Reuben was sharing, which he did it real quick. I told but it was the story of Moses, and when the Israelites were complaining, King James, fiery serpents, snakes, and Reuben was telling it to my friend Albert, who Charlie just left. But the snakes bit the people, and the people were under judgment, and God told Moses to do a particular thing in order for them to kind of escape or to be not die. So tell that real quick.
He said, make a bronze snake, wrap it around a pole, lift it in front of the people, and they'll be saved. Then the Lord used it in John 3:16, right before John 3:16, just like Moses lifted up the snake in the desert. So the Son of Man must also be lifted up, that whoever believes in him will be saved.
Amen. I've taught that one a lot. It's interesting. I'll see if I can. I'm using Reuben. Reuben's. I had a dare today from my friend Albert, and I don't like those dares, so I had to do it. Albert says we're going to be at the trees, and he says you got your Yamaha 650, but Reuben's got that nice Harley. Like you ain't going to be wanting to park it. I said I'm going. So we got both ways. Little Charlie just left, and I could have done a little talk with little Charlie, but maybe I'll run into him and a few guys a little while. I didn't do any updates today. I'll do a little bit of the news, actually, we were discussing. But that story of John 3:16, I like it. And it's interesting. I've told it a lot. Reuben just told it well. But in John 3, Nicodemus, it's the famous chapter, Nicodemus comes to Jesus by night because Nicodemus was a Pharisee, a religious leader, and some of them were having questions. Maybe this is really the Messiah. They never really knew, and some were button heads with Jesus all the time, like the other story Reuben just mentioned. But he comes at night, and then he says, we know that you are a teacher sent from God, because no man can do these miracles that thou doest, except God be with him. And right away Jesus answers him. Not according to like a big debate. He says, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. What? And so Nicodemus says, how can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb and be born? No, that which is born of the flesh is flesh, that which is born of the spirit is spirit. I say unto you, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom. Then they get into this teaching where Jesus brings up that story.
I like the part where he says, just like the wind blows to and fro and you can't see it, that's the way it is with the Spirit. Because when I was praising God, it built up my stomach. You don't see it, but you sure do feel it. It's just like it was the day of, it was the Feast of Tabernacles, used to be the Feast of Harvest. And day of Moses said, the Lord stood up on the last and greatest day of the feast and said, if any man thirst, let him come to me, for as it is written, out of his belly will flow rivers of living water. And that's what he was talking about, just like the Spirit blows to and fro.
Yes.
You don't see it, but it's there.
And that's also in John's Gospel, that as well. Jesus will tell Nicodemus that story about as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so much the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Whoever believes on him is going to be saved. And then the famous John 3:16. But it's an interesting story for Jesus to mention the bronze or brass serpent. In the Ten Commandments, one of the commandments is you're not going to make any statues or images. But in this case,
the commandment says, "Thou shalt make for yourself no idols."
Yeah.
It can be anything there. You're the one that makes an idol. You're the one that makes an idol.
and it's interesting because what God's response to Moses, even though Moses received at that stage in the history of Israel, the 10 Commandments were already given. And yet God says, I want you to make basically a statue of a serpent or a snake. And it's going to be bronze, and you're going to stick it on a pole. Whoever looks at it is not going to die from being snake bitten. And how does that typify Christ? Why would Jesus say, just like that snake, that bronze statue of a snake was put on a pole, how is Jesus saying, so must the Son of Man be lifted up? The snake represents, bronze represents judgment. The snake is a thing in Scripture that's cursed. Jesus becomes a curse for the world, dying for the sins of the world upon the cross. That's how that image and that type fits. That's how that picture fits. But it was interesting, you know, all the years that
it is written, "Cursed is the man who hangs on a pole."
Yes, cursed is a man who hangs on a tree. I've told a lot of that before, but it just came up talking, and I wasn't planning on. You know, all the years I worked at the fire department, I used to sit in the stalls where we parked the trucks and the ambulance, and I used to read. But on that ambulance, there's an emblem that all these ambulances have, and the emblem is a snake on a pole.
Right.
It comes from that
It's
story.
always been a sign of healing.
It's a yes, it's a sign of healing. Now, Albert was bringing up something that he often tells as a joke, but sometimes it gets Bobby Johnson like mad. But Albert kids around sometimes and says, "I'm a born again Muslim," and he kind of does that just as a joke. He's not serious about it. But I got to admit, I do kid Albert a lot, and so sometimes the guys are joking around.
I got trouble when I was a kid. It's in West Texas in the mid-'60s. I told them I would be an atheist, but I'm scared of going to hell. And the kids told the teacher, and it wasn't a dirty word, but the teacher took me down to the principal's office. Oh, yeah. I said, I don't want to be an atheist. A lot of the kids didn't know what it meant, but the teacher did, and the principal did.
Just the fact that he used the word atheist is, so that was interesting. This is about 8 minutes, so I'll shut it. But I was just, look, I Googled the news. I sit there and Google the news. But Reuben's talking to Albert, and that came up kind of like on its own. I said, man, I'm going to do a quick video. So that's it. I might run into a few brothers in a little while, but that's a good message. And my brother James, I didn't see him today because he got a job. You've been seeing him on the video, but he tells me he has a lot of good fellowship time with Reuben. So maybe Reuben's going to have a particular calling, you know, out here, and there's a need for it. Final word, Reuben.
I didn't obey Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I wanted a wife and I went around looking for one. Found one in the church of Acts. She tore me up so bad inside I grieved the Holy Ghost of God for 3 days and 3 nights. That's why, you know, this is like the scripture says, seek the Lord with all your heart. You know, if you just seek Him, everything else falls in place. I should have never went looking for a wife.
Yes, you know, the scripture says, whoso findeth the wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor of the Lord. But it's in God's timing, you know. It's got to be in God's timing.
I don't want to keep with
okay. I'm gonna shut it now because it's windy and most of them can't hear the last 2 minutes because of the wind. All right, God bless everybody.